Okay, so it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this session on Universalizing Caste, exploring the interface of caste, religion, and region. Now, a couple of months back, we had a colloquium on caste. In that particular colloquium, the speakers discussed caste as a concept, then the question of atrocities and the laws to address them, reservations, and they also discussed tribes conceptually. So the question is, what is the rationale for another session on it? And the rationale is that for being journalists who can observe society or study society, it is very important that you understand ascriptive hierarchies, which means simply hierarchies at birth. In one sense, they are universal. And this is also very newsworthy in the sense that when you read newspapers, you must have heard about a lot of debate around, can scheduled caste reservations be extended to Pasmanda Muslims or to Dalit Christians? Now, there's a common sense. The common sense would say, but well, caste is essentially a Hindu phenomenon. Islam has no caste. Christianity does not have caste. If the reservation is caste-based, then why reservation at all? But the question forgets one thing. What we call caste, a word that comes from the Portuguese castas, primarily means hierarchy at birth. And it means hierarchies at birth, because there's no singular pan-Indian hierarchy. There are multiple patterns of hierarchy within India, and not just within India. Ascriptive hierarchy is found across the world. So what you call race in the United States is also hierarchy at birth. What you call caste in the Indian context is also hierarchies at birth. Now the question is that I'll just give you a couple of examples because caste has been studied by sociologists, by historians, by anthropologists. When historians went into the study of caste, they came across two categories, Varn and caste. And conventional historical wisdom in India, and I could take names like Romila Thapar or A.L. Basham, they basically argued that functional divisions of caste came up with the second urbanization of the 6th century BC. Now, okay, there's a problem there. These came up perhaps in the 6th century BC in the context of Bihar and eastern UP, where the second urbanization happened. These may not be part of a pan-Indian scheme. We don't know when ascriptive hierarchies came up in different parts of India. But you'll be surprised to know that historical research on Hinduism says it's a 19th century construct, or at best a medieval construct. What I'm trying to get at is that ascriptive hierarchies, which are localized, predate every organized religion in India. And those hierarchies stay. They're also dynamic. As Dr. Lakshmanan will tell you, caste has been around for a long time, but caste is dynamic. It changes. It changes constantly. Today it operates in a different way than, the way it operated maybe 100 years ago. So, ascriptive hierarchy is universal, but it varies with time and space. So, through this session, perhaps one, you can understand the universality of ascriptive hierarchies, and two, their variations in time and space. So, Ms. Semilar from Loyola College will tell you about the experience of caste in Tamil Nadu state, which is very important because you're studying in a journalism school that is based out of Chennai. So you must have a sense of the local flavor of social exclusion of hierarchies in Tamil Nadu. And the temporal variations will be captured in the talk of Dr. Lakshmanan. But before that, of course, we'll have Dr. Khalid Anis Ansari, who is a leading intellectual on the Pasmanda question, which is also a very newsworthy question that you as journalists must know. So, well, my 5 minutes are over, and I will now invite my colleague, Akash, to begin the session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today's seminar, Universalizing Caste, is also very crucial, I feel, for our students because a lot of the students are doing stories on, especially during covering deprivation stories, some of them came across caste issues among the Muslim communities, right? So it's my pleasure to invite, to welcome Dr. Khalid Anis Ansari, Ms. Semilar, and Dr. Lakshmana to the seminar. Dr. Khalid is an assistant professor of sociology at Ajim Premji University, Bangalore. He's interested in post-colonial modernity, democratic deepening, anti-caste movements, and transformative politics in general. Dr. Khalid acquired his PhD from the University of Humanistic Studies, Utrecht, Netherlands. His doctoral work explored the conceptual relationship between pluralism, democracy, and internal minorities through the case study of anti-caste Pasmanda Muslim movement in India. He has emphasized the limitations of the dominant religious lens and associated conceptual dyads like majority, minority, secularism, communalism in understanding contemporary minority politics. Dr. Khalid is currently developing the Pluralism Studies project, particularly concerning the crisis of contemporary Indian democracy. Before joining the Ajim Premji University, Dr. Khalid worked as an associate professor of sociology at Global University and headed the Ambedkar Center for Exclusion Studies and Transformative Action. Dr. Khalid has an experience of over 20 years in academic and social sectors. Dr. Khalid advocates and engages passionately with democratic social movements. He has published and lectured widely in reputed academic and popular spaces. His forthcoming works are titled Revisiting the Minority Imagination, an inquiry into the anti-caste Pasmanda Muslim discourse in India, and another paper titled Religion, Caste, and Affirmative Action, the aporias of quota for Muslim and Christian minorities of Dalit origin. So with this introduction, I would like to invite Dr. Khalid to speak, to give his talk.
Thank you, Akash, for the kind words. At the onset, I would like to thank the Asian College of Journalism, particularly Dr. Nalini Rajan, Dr. Vikas Pathak, and Akash, for having me here. I wanted to do a PPT, but somehow, since I was traveling, I could not do that. And you'll have to bear with a very classical sort of paper reading, right? So bear with me. I understand the attention spans. So let's see how it goes, right? So it's a long paper, so I'll read, I'll skip a few parts and see if I can cover that in 40 minutes. That is the time I have. Okay. Akash, can you just hint when it is 30 to 34? Okay. Okay, so my paper is titled Revisiting the Minority Imagination, an inquiry into the anti-caste Pasmanda Muslim discourse in India. Muslims are the most significant religious minority in India. Muslim as a religio-cultural category has historically evolved, and despite its mainstream monolithic representations, it encompasses adherents from various ethnicities, castes, linguistic regional groups, sects, maslaks, and so on. In terms of caste, Dalit backward and tribal Muslims comprise about 85% of Indian Muslim population. However, the category of minority has been positioned in a conflictual relation with that of caste, with the politicization of caste within Muslims. Since the 1990s, India has witnessed the mobilizations of lower caste Muslims against the hegemony of the so-called privileged caste Muslims. The enactment of the Pasmanda identity and the formation of the All India Pasmanda Muslim Mahas by lower caste Muslims in 1998 inaugurated radical social negativity in the minority space. The Pasmanda counter discourse has challenged the monolithic representations of Islam and Indian Muslims and the critical elements of the entrenched Muslim minority discourse. I argue that the discursive contestations by oppressed sections like the Pasmanda Muslims have shifted the minority imagination in irredeemable ways, the emerging constellations of critique and anomalies signal a paradigm shift. They increasingly question the tenability of the concept of minority and the majority-minority framework in addressing the complexities of difference and inequality. So I begin with the first section. So this is about Muslim minority discourse and caste in India, where I'll try to contextualize the Pasmanda movement. In the medieval period, there was a persistent cultural distance between the immigrant Muslims, Turks, Afghans, Mughals, Persians, Arabs, and Africans, and native indigenous converts to Islam, mainly lower castes and peripheral tribes. The immigrant Muslim elite, who ruled significant parts of the Indian subcontinent for about 6 centuries, 1191 to 1757 precisely, took pride in their ancestry and the high Persianate Islamicate culture. Sabharwal posits that while the immigrant ruling class, the high status Ashraf, had forged alliances with high status indigenous groups, it had also kept a distance from the indigenous converts of lower caste and artisanal backgrounds, the Ajlaf. While the Persianate Islamicate culture was the dominant reference point, there was a fertile exchange with the Sanskritic Vedic culture to arrive at a cultural synthesis far removed from the traditions of the commonality. The social identities were fuzzier, and until the 19th century, religion had not trumped other identities like caste, sect, region, language, and so on. However, this image of Indian society began to alter with the deepening of British colonization and the mapping of India through the Orientalist religious lens. The combination of one, colonial governmentality, the censors, gazetteers, ethnography, and differentiated patronage regime; two, religious revivalist reformist movements aided by print capitalism and new transportation technologies; three, interreligious violence had a profound influence on social identities. While religious difference was articulated as the key fault line of Indian society, Islam Muslims were associated with iconoclastic fanaticism and social equality, and Hinduism Hindus with tolerance and caste-based social inequality. And this is very important. So this framing of Islam as intolerant but equal, and the framing of Hinduism as tolerant but inegalitarian. So the first move is religion becoming the overarching identity to map and understand India, and then this second move. And the third is that caste becomes an internal moment of Hinduism. So caste before the colonial intervention is generally, it is understood through a non-religious lens. But this religionization of caste happens due to the Oriental colonial influence, and caste becomes a Hindu phenomena, rather than a phenomena of political power, a state, its relationship with various ethnicities, and so on and so forth. I'll come back to it. With the installation of semi-parliamentary practices around 1920, numbers became central, and political elites who had to respond to the new facts of life tried both to enlarge the communities they represented and to define their boundaries more clearly. In an evolving democratic game, the categories Hindus and Muslims became proxies for the interests of the privileged numerical minorities, the high caste Savarna Hindu and Ashraf Muslim sections. The image of Hindus and Muslims as bounded communities in an irreconcilable relationship eventually led to the tragic partition of British India into India and Pakistan in 1947. Minority is a status juridical category. While in the colonial era, the term minority referred to both religio-cultural and socially backward groups, the post-colonial phase witnessed an uncoupling of backward classes from minorities. The minorities were bifurcated into religious linguistic minorities who were guaranteed cultural rights. At the same time, the subjugated castes and tribes, SCs, STs, OBCs, were conferred political rights. The religious linguistic minorities defined in numerical inferiority sought to be protected through various constitutional provisions. On the other hand, the SCs, STs, and OBCs, defined in terms of disadvantage, were beneficiaries of affirmative action policies. The religious linguistic minorities were envisaged as permanent minorities, and the subjugated caste tribes were construed as ephemeral that would be eclipsed in time. Broadly, religion as difference and caste as inequality capture the post-colonial minority imagination of the Indian state. The categories Muslim and minority, just like the categories Hindu and majority, cannot be construed as essentialist from a constructivist vantage point. Their invention, genealogies, and variation in signification can be historically charted. In post-colonial India, the process of minoritization was catalyzed through the articulation between the logics of Muslim as a religio-cultural category and minority as a status juridical category. I will refer to the combination of these two logics as the Muslim-minority discourse, which unifies three key elements: identity and the religio-cultural, security and interreligious violence, equity and affirmative action. Muslim minority discourse signifies, stabilizes, and reproduces these elements through community and state institutions. It is in this sense that Robinson states that Muslims and minorities have become almost synonymous in political discourses. In this discourse, religion is advanced as the overarching identity, and Muslims are presented as monolithic with unified interests. Sayyid Shahabuddin, an ideologue, stated, and I'm quoting, "For a Muslim at the personal level, his religious identity is supreme, rising above race, language, geography, or political jurisdiction. Indeed, he is not prepared to trade his religious identity at any price: bread, profession, vocation, political ideology, or national identity." In the last 2 decades, the critical elements of the Muslim minority discourse have been contested by the mobilizations of lower caste Muslims through the naming of the Pasmanda identity. The literature on the sociology of Muslims and Islam, Muslim caste and stratification, is an interpretative exercise on whether caste is a purely Hindu survival in post-conversion communities, B, a learnt or newly reproduced institution due to the influence of surrounding Hindu society, and C, the product and expression of tendencies internal to Islam. Fanslow notes an intriguing paradox, where there is a broad consensus among anthropologists that Indian Muslims have caste, but the Indian Muslims themselves remain in a state of denial. How does one account for this erasure of caste in popular Muslim imagination? Caste has historically been a dynamic institution that is contingent on changing power relations. And Dirks has historicized Hindu caste in his articulation of the colonial invention of caste. There is now emergent literature that challenges the near unanimous consensus that caste and Hinduism are inextricably linked, and argues for the decoupling of caste and Hinduism. Fanslow sees an intimate connection between the staging of caste as the central symbol of Hindu society and Muslims' denial of caste in a context where both identities mutually assert their religious difference. Hence, and I'm quoting Fanslow, hence, insofar as caste or caste-like structures and values existed among Muslims, they had to be disinvented. When caste became a gatekeeping concept for Hindus, it thus also became an ethnic boundary marker to distinguish Hindus from the non-Hindus. I would contend that the recent surfacing of caste as a sign of counter-hegemony to the Muslim minority discourse in the form of the Pasmanda movement is the return of Muslim caste as the colonial repressed or the disinvented under enabling conditions. The enactment of the Pasmanda identity in 1998 by the All India Pasmanda Muslim Mahas led by Ali Anwar, a journalist activist, inaugurated a new space of counter-hegemonic signification vis-a-vis the Muslim minority discourse. Pasmanda, a Persian word meaning those who have been left behind, refers to the Dalit, backward, and tribal Muslims, who make up the majority of the Indian Muslim population. The sociological descriptions usually indicate three kinds of Muslim status groups in decreasing order of prestige: the Ashraf, or the high caste sections combining Muslims of foreign descent with native converts from high caste Hindu groups. Second, the Ajlaf, converts from the Shudra or backward occupational origins. Third, the Arzal, converts from the formerly untouchable or Dalit origins. The broad status groups are further internally differentiated into various ranked occupational and endogamous caste groups. The Sayyids, Sheikhs, Mughals, and Pathans are the highest caste, with the position of the Sayyids being analogical to the Brahmins in the Hindu community. The Julaha weavers, Dunya cotton carders, Teli oil pressers, Badhai carpenters, and so on constitute the backward classes. The Bakho, gypsies, Kasai butchers, halal khors, sweepers, dhobis, launderers, and so on are considered Dalit Muslims. There is also a fourth class of Adivasi Muslims that refers to converts from tribal forest communities like the Van Gujjar, Bhil, and Gond, etc. Since there is a correlation between caste and class, most Pasmanda Muslims often work as petty peasants, artisans, and laborers in the precarious informal sector of the economy. Muslims usually use the term Zat or Biradri to refer to caste, and the Anthropological Survey of India's People of India project has documented 705 Jati or Biradri groups within Muslims. The publication of Ali Anwar's Masawat Ki Jang, which is translated The Battle for Equality, this is the major book that articulates the Pasmanda movement. In 2001, this book was published, was an epochal event in articulating the Pasmanda movement. Masawat is a grounded and incisive account of the discrimination faced by the Pasmanda Muslims in the religio-cultural and the politico-economic spheres. But the Pasmanda counter discourse deconstructs the Muslim minority discourse informed by anti-caste analytics of Dalit Bahujan radicals as an apparatus to secure Ashraf elite interests at the expense of the Pasmanda Muslims. The Ashraf Muslim, or the privileged high caste Muslim, it emerges as the principal adversary and oppositional identity. By privileging caste difference over religious difference, Pasmanda counter discourse has crafted Pasmanda as a new political subject, an internal other in terms of power, and a majority within a minority in numeric terms. The availability of caste as a category for conducting politics by lower caste Muslims may be located within India's broader trajectories of political modernity and anti-caste radicalism. The first wave of Pasmanda politics was marked by the emergence of various lower caste Muslim caste associations as reformist collectives and pressure groups. So there are two waves. I will just briefly summarize that. So the first wave is before independence, before 1947. It was led by Abdul Qayyum Ansari, and there was an organization called the Moment Conference. It was a lower caste organization dominated by the lower caste Muslim weavers from North India. And the Moment Conference challenged the Muslim League politics and the politics of partition, and it challenged the two-nation theory head-on, right? And in 1938, one of the leaders of the Moment Conference, Mr. A. Noor, he also demanded a separate electorate for the lower caste Muslims, in contrast to the separate electorate for Muslims that they were already enjoying from 1909 onwards. So that is the first phase. Second phase starts from 1990s onwards, right? I'll begin with that. However, the second wave of Pasmanda politics from the 1990s onward was activated by the significant events of the 1990s. The three M's, Mandir, Masjid, markets, the neoliberal politics, and so on and so forth. And these events, they symbolically ruptured the nationalist constitutional consensus, mainly the understanding of secularism and minority rights, centralized socialist planning, and affirmative action. An acute social identity crisis followed, creating the space for new political subjectivities to emerge. This is happening in the crucible of 1990s. Notably, and this is important, notably, the extent constitutional and policy consensus, religion as difference, and caste as inequality. It was seriously problematized with the inclusion of 82 lower caste Muslim groups in the list of other backward classes by the Mandal Commission, thereby rendering them eligible for quotas in public employment. In contrast to the enduring Orientalist colonial legacy of caste as an inegalitarian Hindu institution, the Mandal movement was an official recognition of the stamp of caste in putatively egalitarian religions like Islam. Spurred by the official recognition of Muslim caste and the eroding legitimacy of elite secular minority politics to provide justice for the lower caste Muslims and protect them from endemic communal violence, a new phase of Muslim anti-caste mobilizations surfaced in the states of Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, and Maharashtra. Upadhyay has characterized this phase as the Mandalization of Muslim politics. Now I'll move to the critical elements of the Pasmanda counter discourse. So the Pasmanda counter discourse, it challenges three key elements. One is the identity and the question of solidarity. Second is communal violence, issues of security. And the third, equity, affirmative actions. Right? So I'll just begin with them. The first element of the Pasmanda counter discourse is engagement with the religio-cultural questions. Broadly, the Ashraf cultural value framework constitutes the hegemonic norm in Indian Muslim society, which invisibilizes and inferiorizes lower caste Muslims' perspectives, cultures, and bodies. One may abstract from the literature 4 critical features of the Ashraf culture that are instrumental in culturally colonizing the Pasmanda Muslims. 1, the disdain for manual labor. 2, the endorsement of hierarchy and reverence for Sayyids as a class. C, the employment of language, Arabic, Persian, Urdu, as a boundary maintenance mechanism. And 4, D, the privileging of Sharafat as an elite Ashraf culture that embodies particular modes of piety, character building, and taste. The hierarchical Ashraf culture militates against the lower caste Muslim life worlds, denigrating stories, popular idioms, jokes, and proverbs, naturalize and reproduce the stereotypes related to the Pasmanda communities. The Julahas or weavers are characterized as foolish and unreliable. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, renowned Muslim educationist, referred to them as Badzat, which means lowly born, lousy, ill-bred, or mean. The halal khors and lal begis are mocked for being engaged in the unclean occupation of sweeping and are victims of the practice of untouchability. The women of the Bhatiara caste, traditionally keepers of inns, are supposed to be of suspect sexual character. The rangares or dyers are derided for association with a foul smell because the base material, saresh, used for printing is made of decomposing leather. The socio-cultural discrimination against the Pasmanda communities is manifested in practice like the use of surnames of Pasmanda communities as invectives and curse words, discrimination against Pasmanda communities during burials in the graveyards and community prayers in the mosques, spatial segregation in Muslim neighborhoods based on caste, violent reprisals against inter-caste love marriages, social boycott, caste atrocity, and extravagant revenge against Pasmanda sections for violating caste norms and hierarchy. The social distance between Ashraf and lower caste Muslims is marked in Pasmanda narratives. Muhammad Ibrahim, one of the activists, senior activists of the Mahas, and I'm quoting, he says, "I did not find even a single place that has not faced exploitation, shoshan, repression, daman, or torture, atyachar, by the Ashraf." Ibrahim uses the word karahiyat, which means contempt, karahiyat, and ghin, scorn, to capture the Ashraf attitude towards the lower caste Muslims. I'm quoting from one of his interviews. The Ashraf feel a certain contempt, karahiyat, hatred, ghrina, I mean scorn, ghin, because these people, that is the Pasmanda, they perform lowly work, they weave, get drenched in sweat, their clothes emanate foul odor, they clean filth or sell meat, their clothes and utensils are different. According to Ali Anwar, the attribution of notions like hasab nasab, which means inherited merit and noble descent, notions like hasab nasab, in Muslim society, to the influence of Hindu culture is only a half-truth. Terms like Ashraf, Ajlaf, and Arzal are based on Arabic roots sharf, sharif or noble, jalf, which means base or low, and razl, which means abominable, and indicate the presence of inegalitarianism in Arab society. In studies on Indian Muslim society, a tendency to impose the burden of caste-based discrimination on Hindu society is noticed. However, this is not the full truth. That is what Ali Anwar says. Anwar locates a legitimating vocabulary for social hierarchy in the classical Islamic texts themselves. In the Indian context, reference is made to the exemplary work Fatwa-e-Jahandari, written in the 14th century by Turkish scholar Ziauddin Burni, which legitimizes Ashraf supremacy through repeated references to the Quran. Maulvi Shah Ashraf Ali Thanvi's Behishti Zevar, exemplifying the presence of graded inequality in Indian Islam, holds that, and I'm quoting from Behishti Zevar, which is a text which is usually circulated during marriages. It is gifted to the bride during marriages, Behishti Zevar. The status of a Sayyid is more than the others. This is Behishti Zevar. The status of a Sayyid is more than the others. The Mughals and Pathans are regarded as one nation and are not of the same class as that of the Sayyids and Sheikhs. Equality in occupation is that, example, weavers are not regarded as equal to tailors and are accorded a status that is lower than that of the tailors. Similarly, barbers, washermen, etc. are not regarded as being equal to tailors, but are regarded as being lower than tailors. Quote closed. Ali Anwar dubs these clerics as the Manu of Muslims. The complicity and silence of the ulama-e-din, that is the religious scholars, and faith-based educational institutions, madrasas, on the question of Muslim caste is criticized. Muhammad Ibrahim complains that, and it's a quote, Muhammad Ibrahim complains that the same old syllabus is being followed for centuries in madrasas because Ashraf control that. The Ashraf only want to keep us like slaves so that we keep on acknowledging their supremacy, keep on following the Sayyids and Sayyidism, that is Sayyid Parasti. Anwar advocates for a culture of critique and introspection, alochna or atma-alochna, in the community as the precondition for Islam muashara, social reform, including questions of gender reform and theological interpretation. Ashraf cultural framework works with the idea of sharafat, language and its proper use, particular modes of piety, character and trace, as a boundary maintenance mechanism with the lower caste Muslims. In K.M. Ashraf's view, again a quote, if you don't wear a particular type of dress or don't speak high-flown Urdu, it becomes difficult for you to be seen as a proper Muslim. According to Nur Hasan Azad, the founding member of the Mahaz, again a quote, the mother tongue for Dalit Muslims is region-based. I went to Darbhanga, a district of Bihar. All the conversations happened in Maithili. Similarly, people speak Bhojpuri or Bangla in different regions. It is a false claim that Urdu is the mother tongue of Muslims. Neither Urdu nor Hindi is their mother tongue. Unki matra bhasha to kshetriya hai. Their mother tongue is regional. Kavi Yaqub, a widely acclaimed Telugu poet, in the poem Awwal Kalma, captures the sense of disdain. This is from his poem, Awwal Kalma. Kavi Yaqub, he's a Telugu poet. Sheikh Sayyid Pathan, flaunting the glories of your khandans, families, did you ever let us come closer to you? Further, he says, surprise, the language we know, that is Telugu, isn't ours, we are told. We don't know the language, that is Urdu, you call ours. We have ended up as a people without a mother tongue, cast out for speaking Telugu. You speak good Telugu despite being a Muslim? Should I laugh or cry? Another Telugu poet, Sheikh Piran Borewala, belonging to the caste of Gani bag sack weavers, complains, you, Ashraf, avoided all relations with me because of my caste and lifestyle. You considered me unfit. I mingle amidst you, but still you look at me with derision and talk differently with me, interact coldly with me, and show scorn for my occupation. Now it's a time for extempore. So that was the first element, the religio-cultural questions. And I tried to represent what is going on in that field. There are two more important questions. They are, one, the question of communal violence and secularism. And second, the question of equity, affirmative action. And the Pasmanda activists, they have challenged both these. In terms of the communal violence, there are 2 or 3 moves that they have made. One, they see communal ideology and communal violence as an pan-religion elite machination to preserve the elite interest, right? So that is the, so for example, just take, this is a quote from one of the activists. While Muslim politicians like Imam Bukhari and Sayyid Shahabuddin add the Jodan, which is the starter yogurt, it is left to the Hindu fundamentalists to prepare the yogurt of communalism. Both are responsible. We oppose the politics of both Hindu and Muslim fanaticism. So Hindu majoritarian and Muslim minoritarian fundamentalisms are held as symbiotic and co-constitutive. And there is stress on contesting Muslim minoritarianism to contain the former. Anwar employs the class spatial distribution of vulnerability during anti-Muslim violence to suggest that most victims are lower caste Muslims. I'm quoting. Those who were lynched, they were Pasmanda Muslims. Look at the history of violence. Those who live in protected localities, those in possession of licensed weapons, or those who live in posh colonies are very rarely victims. Those who sleep on the footpaths, those who walk back from the railway station or the bus stand are the ones who are attacked. Anwar observes that while most victims of the anti-Muslim violence are the Pasmanda Muslims, the entrepreneurship around Muslim victimhood benefits the Ashraf sections in consolidating their self-proclaimed leadership over the community. Ambedkar's observation on the role of riots in the reproduction of Hindu identity also holds for the Muslim identity. And I'm quoting Ambedkar. A caste has no feeling that it is affiliated to other caste, except when there is a Hindu-Muslim riot. On all other occasions, each caste endeavors to segregate itself and to distinguish itself from other castes. Communal violence legitimizes and reproduces, according to Kaiser, elite Muslim restoration politics. The third critique is on the questions of equity and affirmative action policies. So it's around questions of redistribution, recognition, and representation. So the first critique is against the neoliberal economic policies as such, because most Pasmanda Muslims are either peasants, they work in the unorganized sector, as working class, and so on and so forth. So there is a sense that the neoliberal policies have really hit them hard. And there are demands for various kinds of subsidies, different kinds of training to these traditional workers. So that is the first element there. The second is about representation. So, for example, I'll just read out the data from the Aligarh Muslim University, because that is supposed to be a minority institution, right? So if you look at the Aligarh Muslim University, and this data is from 2019. So the total faculty in Aligarh Muslim University is 1,288. 1288. That is the total faculty in the Aligarh Muslim University. Out of this 1288, upper caste Muslim faculty is 1,138. So the population of upper caste Muslims is 15%, and the representation in Aligarh Muslim University is around 90%. Muslim OBC faculty is only 62 out of 1288. Interestingly, the non-Muslim faculty is 87, much more than the lower caste Muslims in a minority institution like Aligarh. Right? So if you look at Ali Anwar's book, Sawat Ki Jang, so at the end there are a number of tables there on representation. So I won't go into the detail. If you look at the political representation, then out of the 7,500 elected representatives, from the 1st to the 14th Lok Sabha, that is 1952 to 2004, 400 were Muslims. And out of these 400 Muslim MPs, 340 were upper caste Muslims, and 60 were lower caste Muslims. This means that the upper caste Muslims, with a population of 1.65% of the national population, their representation is 4.5%. So upper caste Muslims, their population is 1.65%, their representation is 4.5%. The Pasmanda Muslims, whose population is around 11%, their representation is 0.8%. So when there is this demand that the Muslim representation is going down in the parliament, once we do the disaggregated analysis on caste terms, the picture is completely different, right? So upper caste Muslims are almost doubly represented throughout. Okay, on Muslim quota, so the Pasmanda Muslims, they challenged this notion of a total Muslim quota. And they said that the upper caste Muslims have historically been a ruling class, and by no stretch of imagination can they be characterized as a backward class, as OBCs. So they have throughout challenged this notion of a separate Muslim quota. And there is one more concern, which is about the religious neutrality of the SC quota. If you look at the existing quotas, then EWS is religious neutral. OBC is religiously neutral. ST, scheduled tribe, is religiously neutral. And communities from all religions can be included in these three categories. It is only the scheduled caste category which is not religiously neutral, right? And there is a 1950 presidential order, clause 3, through which the non-Hindu Dalits, they were ejected from the SC category. In 1956, the Sikh Dalits were included, and in 1990, the Buddhist Dalits were included, right? So now, technically, only the Christian Dalits and Muslim Dalits, they are excluded. And the Pasmanda movement is challenging this discrimination. It is demanding that the SC category be also made religiously neutral, just like the other categories. And there is a back and forth on that. There's some litigation on that. We can discuss during the question-answer session. But there are two anxieties about including Dalit Muslims and Christians within the SC category. One are the right-wing fantasies of convergence, right? So if you open, then everyone will be converted. So that is one. And second is the long-standing distinction between foreign and Indic religions, which is also there in the Constitution, Article 25B. It is also there in the Hindu Code Bill written by Dr. Ambedkar himself, right, where he defines Hindus in contrast to the foreign religions. It's a long-standing. So this Pitra Bhumi, Punya Bhumi, it starts from William Jones, comes to Savarkar and Dr. Ambedkar, and in the Constitution, and the poor Savarkar is left to blame. So he's not the only one that uses this distinction. So just to leave it at that level. So in terms of identity and solidarity, the Pasmanda discourse privileges caste identity over religious identity. So Ali Anwar says, first Pasmanda and then Muslims afterward. We are Pasmandas first. We are Shudras first, right? So Shudras first and religion Muslims later. So there is a kind of an inversion of identity here. And the Pasmanda movement, it has a slogan, Dalit Pichda Ek Saman, Hindu ho ya Musliman, right? So all Dalit backwards are alike, whether they be Hindu or Muslim. So there is an aspiration for a pan-religion lower caste majority, right? So there's a call for a solidarity of lower caste across religions, and there are various reasons that are articulated. So Ali Anwar says there's a bond of pain between those who are stigmatized on the basis of caste. And this bond of pain is much more stronger than the religious bond. So he's articulating a horizontal solidarity across caste rather than the vertical solidarity on religious lines, right? And then there's a sharp attack on the term minority. So Ali Anwar says, the identity of Pasmanda Muslims was hitherto obscured in the name of the minority. Now we fear the word minority and feel it is a fake, chaliya, it's a fake word. In the name of minority, either someone terrorizes us, so the elite so-called Hindus, or someone snatches away our rights, the elite Muslims. I'll conclude in 3 minutes. Okay. So in the crucible of the 1990s, the mobilizations and anxieties around the 3 M's, Mandir, Mandal markets, put increasing strains on the foundational nationalist constitutional consensus on secularism or minority rights, state socialism, and affirmative action. The limits of the Muslim minority discourse to confer a stable sense of identity, protection, and justice to the Pasmanda Muslims were glaringly visible. The push factor of communal violence and economic pauperization at one level, and the pull factor of Mandal recommendations on the other, catalyzed the activation of the disinvented Muslim caste and the emergence of the Pasmanda counter-discourse. The Pasmanda is signified as a new political subject that locates itself outside the Hindu-Muslim, majority-minority, and secular communal binaries, and aspires for a subversive, pan-religion, lower caste majority. The Pasmanda counter discourse has inaugurated a semantic and analytical battlefield where the received understanding of the concept of minority and majority-minority framework will be under increasing scrutiny. It betrays a deep dissatisfaction with the term minority as it unjustifiably groups together the unequal, Ashraf Muslims and Pasmanda Muslims, and obscures the privileged position of the Ashraf Muslims. The category of minority invisibilizes more than it reveals as far as modes of misrecognition and exclusion are concerned. My paper attempts to capture the tension between the category of minority and anti-caste politics in the Indian context, and it may be catalogued within the growing literature on the analytical and prescriptive limitations of the minority imagination in an age of pluralization. However, the Pasmanda counter discourse also displaces the semantic legitimacy of the terms minorities within minorities or internal minorities, as the imagination of an aspirational pan-religion lowered caste majority breaches the limits of internal. The ensemble of emerging critique by counter-hegemonic discursive spaces, like the Pasmanda, presents a sharp anomaly to the entrenched minority imagination and calls for a new paradigm. The evolving new paradigm, nebulous at present, may be provisionally captured through the term post-minority. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Khalid, for that insightful presentation. There has been a slightly change in the schedule. Ms. Semler has to leave early, so she'll be giving her talk now. And I would request the students, if you have any questions for Dr. Khalid, maybe you can write them down, and we will have a open question answer session. And at the same time, after the talk, also you can interact with him. So, Ms. Semler Selvi is an assistant professor at the Department of Social Work, Loyola College, Chennai. She has done her master's in social work from Madras Christian College and MA in human rights from Madras University. Ms. Semler is also a PhD research scholar at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at IIT Madras. Her doctoral research is focused on difficulties faced by Dalit students in accessing higher education. The main contention of her thesis is how the privatization of higher education sector in India is sharply eliminating the first generation Dalit students who are aspiring to access professional education. Ms. Semler is also a Dalit rights activist, and she has worked with various human rights organizations such as People's Watch Tamil Nadu and National Campaign on Dalit Human Rights. Now I invite Ms. Semler to deliver her talk.
Good afternoon. I know since I've been working with the student community, afternoon sessions, I don't know whether you're made to sit here or whatever, so how much ever possible, like I will just make it a little bit interesting. And then, I don't know, like I also sometimes observe the body language of students, like whether they're attentive or non-attentive and all sorts of things. And I really wanted to appreciate Asian College of Journalism, especially Nalini ma'am and also Vikas, who've just invited me to talk about this caste and the dynamics and the changing patterns and all. I mean, again, working with student community, they feel like, why we need to really know about all these things. I'm sure like many of the students will also have an attitude, is it relevant that we keep discussing about caste? I mean, no more, it is a relevant topic and all. So I just learned from the introduction that already you've been having sessions on reservation and caste and other issues. And now he brought a very different dimension. Of course, we see minority as a problem, but then the dimension of caste actually works across all the religion. So since I was also told that we are just trying to capture how it has been changing, and also I'm just primarily I would be focusing on the context of Tamil Nadu, but just to set a little bit of background. Changing pattern, probably like, I don't know, I'm sure you would be aware that how caste really operated in colonial India. So colonial India, like some of the recent, I mean, who claim to be authors, they also try to write like caste itself is a British construct. I'm sure like it is not a British construct. And of course, you must be studying about this post-colonial theory and all sorts of things. Me being coming from a marginalized community, I sometimes disagree with the point like, no, of course, colonization definitely benefited marginalized communities. That's my personal stand also. There are criticisms. I'm not telling there are no negative effects of colonization and all. Of course, there is oppression, hegemony, and then all sorts of economic deprivation and all sorts of things. But why I was just telling, like from a marginalized perspective, sometimes I feel like already we haven't experienced freedom for a long years, and then you say we got freedom, and that doesn't make any sense to me. So in that context, I feel like, no, of course there was, earlier it was Manusmriti, at least little later there is some sort of codification of law, and then there is, I mean, post-independence, of course it's constitution, we just base everything on the constitution. So I wouldn't say like even British were so keenly working to eliminate the discrimination or to really get rid of the caste and all, definitely not at all in that sense. But at least some of the benefits that from the marginalized communities, they were able to have access to education, access to a lot of public spaces and other stuff. So post-independence, of course, we know like we have a very strong constitution, and then even the preamble of the constitution, I mean, it goes around that everybody have to be treated equal, and there is a strong sense of caste cannot be a factor of discrimination. There is no social sanction. Legally, we can defend showing the constitution. Gradually what happens, like, no, I think like Professor Lakshman will be focusing on post-Mandal Commission, the dynamics of caste at the national level also. And coming back to the point, like, no, how did the nationalist movement really handle this whole point of caste? Of course, till date, I would say, like, we can even pick names and then we can find out Congress as well as BJP, it has been predominantly who are there in the leadership position, definitely. It is like elite, upper caste, dominant communities who are the deciding authorities, whatever, like even informally when we're talking, like we were just discussing about Rahul's Yatra and other stuff, will it bring any impact on our lives? That's the whole point that we always look into it. So I'm sure like even such nationalist movement did not really address this, this point, though we had a constitution. It was more like, no, building a idea of like patriotism and then we Indians kind of thing. So by coming back to the parallel side, like coming to the point of the state of Tamil Nadu, of course, nationalist movement were focusing on nationalism. What was happening here in Tamil Nadu is like, no, it was more to do with Dravidian politics and linguistic politics. So when we talk about Dravidian politics, of course, people were able to easily connect because Tamil Nadu as such, like most of the southern states, have a very strong regional sense. So we were not able to connect with much with the whole idea of nationalism and of course the linguistic politics of Hindi. That really gained a momentum here, that people wanted to have an alternate other than Congress, and then it was the whole Dravidian movement and the Dravidian politics. So when it comes to the point of caste, what was the role of this whole Dravidian ideology? Did it really impact in terms of bringing social justice? We have a very big challenging question before us. So of course, the whole idea started with this like, no, anti-Brahmin or non-Brahmin movement. So what did this whole non-Brahmin movement really do in a real sense? So many times, like, no, we meet very often, like we also used to discuss, like this whole point of non-Brahmin movement did not focus on anti-caste idea. So the whole non-Brahmin movement is just trying to portray like Brahmins are our enemies, and then we have to really, like, no, we are in the clutches of those 2 to 3% of people. Of course, to an extent, we have to agree to that fact, and you know, the Aryan invasion theory and all sorts of things. But in a modern day, like in a realistic sense, are we really at least attacking Brahminical ideology or just the Brahmins as a population? So Brahminical ideology is there even among the Shudras. So Brahminical ideology is like even among like whoever is like patriarchal, it comes from the emanates from the idea of Brahminical ideology. So are we really questioning it? Of course, many a times we think like no, Tamil Nadu is a very progressive state. It spoke social justice way back and all sorts of things. Of course, we have to really thank all the leaders who just spoke about these kind of superstitious belief and then criticized religion and all sorts of things. But did that whole thing impact in terms of annihilating caste, or did it really bring down the Varna system? I don't think like we are successful. Tamil Nadu as a state, though we can call it as a very progressive state, I don't think like we were very successful in that sense. So this anti-Brahmanism was in a way trying to consolidate, consciously or unconsciously, you should only answer, consolidate the other backward communities. So this other backward communities varies from every other region. So we cannot just OBC all across India, pan-India level also, you have multiple other caste. Even in Tamil Nadu, it is the same this thing. But when we really look into, of course, it was Dravidar Kazhagam, then it was DMK, then offshoot of ADMK and other things happened. So the whole Dravidar Kazhagam and then Periyar's writings vehemently opposing the caste system. But where did it go, how it was converted into electoral politics, or the so-called marginalized or Dalits or outcasts or untouchables, where they're given appropriate positions and space, even in politics. Again, it's a big question. So this idea of DMK again playing with the politics of language, and of course it helped to polarize and then consolidate the Tamil people with one identity, that we are against this nationalist idea, we don't want Hindi and all. But when it comes to social justice, I have a very big question. It did not really do well in terms of social justice, and especially in the lives of Dalits. So consolidation, polarization is happening everywhere. Even right-wing politicians, BJP is also doing the same thing, where BJP is trying to project like Hinduism, Hindutva politics versus minorities, Muslims or Christians or whatever. So somehow, like, I don't know if I can do this comparison, but I always have this in my mind. Of late, like, we've been moving towards a phase where it is more to do with like other backward communities versus Dalits. It might be quite shocking, but then that kind of consolidation is only happening. Unconsciously, it was happening all this while. And then I'm little bit afraid that there might be even a conscious effort, even in Tamil Nadu, because Tamil Nadu, as you know, like this kind of religious politics will not work so directly. So it is pretty easy, right-wing groups to work with the caste outfits, because the ideology also matches so well. So when some of the other backward communities, specifically if I have to quote, in certain belt, like there is a one-year Sangam. In certain belt, there is a counter caste Sangam. And then other belt, you can see organization of Mukkulathor. So these caste outfits can easily match with the right-wing Hindutva politics also. So what is happening when we just gradually see, like, of course, which means like even before 90s, we couldn't see much difference in the lives of Dalits as such. But to an extent, other backward communities were benefiting out of land redistribution, or in terms of already having land holdings, because there is one point of economic dependency of the so-called untouchables or outcast. They are economically depending because the landlord is predominantly either forward community or OBC, which is like Shudra in the Varna order. So they have to go for work in their land. Even that kind of change has not happened. So why I'm quoting 1990 is like, no, there are two significant things which has happened in 1990. One is like, early 90s we got into this neoliberalism. So one point that I always insist again and again is like, how it had an impact again on the marginalized community, especially the outcast or the untouchables, is already there is a group of people who've been excluded. And then politically also there is a kind of whole real issue of caste or annihilation of caste is not being discussed. Rather, we are just trying to fix ourselves with the Dravidian ideology, and we all think like we are Tamil people, we have to consolidate ourselves. More like how nationalist politics were trying to consolidate with a nationalist patriotic idea. And then 90s also legally we had this SC/ST Prevention of Atrocity Act, which came into enforcement. So on the one side, like neoliberalism, definitely it is having a very negative impact on the lives of marginalized community because they are already excluded. And this whole privatization, other stuff which is coming into practice is also having an impact on the lives of people. Of course, even my research and other stuff, it is focusing on how these marginalized communities are neo-socially excluded, how these people are excluded with the dimension of LPG, privatization, other stuff. But this SC/ST, the other side, the SC/ST Prevention of Atrocity Act, which came into force, is also having an impact because already we were not living as a very egalitarian society or equal society, that we were respecting, there was no mutual respect between all the other people, and caste system itself will have its own value. It will not, discrimination is not happening only among the untouchables, rather the entire system is discriminating each other. Brahmin, even within the Brahmins there is discrimination, not that everybody are treated equal and all, that is there. But when this early 90s, if you could see, of course, there is also a connection of largely post-Mandal Commission at the national level. But Tamil Nadu level, you could see lot of atrocities which is happening, especially in the southern belt also. So there are a lot of publications, a lot of documents, lot of books. You can just have access how these whole atrocities and violence, mass violence are happening, not only in southern belt, in other parts also. So who is like involving in this kind of mass violence? Who is actually attacking Dalits? Who is attacking the outcasts? It is the so-called Shudra community, the other backward communities. So there is a strong friction between this OBCs and Dalits. So I can name any, as I named the caste groups in every other region, districts, they are the one who are attacking or getting into violence. But many a times, even this Dravidian idea of Dravidian politics or Dravidar Kadangam, whoever, they try to always criticize only the Brahminical ideology or the Brahmins, not really looking into the core issue of who's attacking who. The clash is happening between where you can quote any violence, Mudugalator or anything, even till date, all the communal clashes and the clashes which is being instigated by the political party or the caste group, they wanted to really make benefit out of it because out of polarization they get vote in that particular region. So this act, the implementation of this act is also, in my opinion, my observation, it is also bringing in lot of negative opinion among them that there is a protection, but then still a lot of violation or atrocities are happening in the late 90s. And then, of course, even people were not able to contest in Panchayat election, daylight, people were murdered. And then you might think like it's happening only in 1980s. Even till today, like very recent times, we have people when they marry out of their caste, there is honor killing. So what is the response of the so-called progressive Dravidian ideologues when it comes to this honor killing? Why people are in mute? Why do they not talk about it openly? Because they fear, they always, in fact, both DMK and ADMK for that matter. So of course, ADMK, the dynamics is totally different. Of course, there was our late Chief Minister Jayalalitha. She's a Brahmin woman. But then ADMK always had an image that it is consolidating the OBC power. Initially, it was OPS, O Pannirselvam. By making him as a chief minister, they were able to consolidate the votes in South, especially the Mukkulattur vote. And little later, it was Edappadi Palanichami. Again, they could gain the vote of counters in that sense. So we cannot expect much from ADMK. I've been pretty critical about DMK, especially when it comes to this addressing the issue of caste. Why I feel like, no, I don't expect much from ADMK is like, no, of course, they came out of DMK and then the only idea that they had was creating an opposing idea against the DMK. They were not the party was not started with this image of social justice party or with Periyar's ideology or nothing like that. They are very open. Even on the other day, we were just very jokingly telling like even the songs that they play only cinema songs. Even they don't have a song which talks about their ideology. And I question whether they have ideology. So I will just leave them, and it is the dynamics of between, like it is between Edapadi or in a very casual note, I sometimes write in social media also, when ADMK is getting into power struggle, it is only between, among the OBCs, it is between Mukkulathor or Devas and Counters. There is no space for even Dalits to be discussed, because that dynamics is totally different in that context, and they were not working on ideological this thing. And of course, as you know, now they have joined with the right-wing BJP, and then they've been like the entire party is being controlled by BJP, if I have to be very, very openly, and you all know it. But my criticism is against DMK, because DMK is the one which claims to be a social justice party, which claims that we are premised on the Periyar's ideology. But when you are premised on Periyar's ideology, your own party, why do you make the candidate selection who can really polarize the vote in a particular section? If there are more counters, you make a counter DMK representative to contest in election. So what is this whole concept of social justice? Are they really thinking about the idea of annihilation of caste as proposed by Ambedkar? Of course, Periyar was criticizing Brahminical idea and Varna system and religion, all sorts of things. But have they really understood or misunderstood just as the Shudra consolidation or OBC consolidation? It's a big question before us. So in that sense, we are pretty critical about it. Of course, Periyar's feministic thought and other thoughts have infiltrated in southern part, especially in Tamil Nadu. It is to an extent helped in terms of comparing our state with the other North Indian states. But again, when it comes to intercaste marriage, even I was just looking into statistics, all India level also, it is falling very less when it comes to intercaste marriage. Tamil Nadu also, it is less than 5% only. So when we are talking about so much of progressive politics, so when somebody is wanting to marry other than their own caste, especially when it comes to a person is trying to marry a Dalit, definitely there is a chance that person, honor killing. And why, okay, honor killing is happening, then why we are claiming as a Periyar state and social justice state? And what is the response of this government? Even DMK government, when it came, now I think it's almost 2 years, when it is a normal issue, the chief minister is just looking into the social media content and then going and then eating food with the gypsy community. And then everybody thinks like, no, okay, chief minister is like for everybody. But the same chief minister is going to Garland, Muthuramalinga, they were all the way traveling there, and then wanted to show his identity and solidarity with the Mukkulathor, because Devar has been praised as a god, and then they do all sorts of puja and everything. Our social justice chief minister is going there and then showing his solidarity there. Rather, he is just putting a tweet when it is Ambedkar birth anniversary or something. So it might be taken very lightly also. But in a state where there is, even the National Crime Records Bureau is documenting atrocities are increasing against the Dalits. So in that context, we always think like a new government after 10 years, what is his stand? Is he standing with the marginalized community? Or is he not aware of all these things? I wouldn't say he's not aware of all these things. So somehow I feel this present Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu wanting to appease every other backward community. One recent example that we were just discussing, I was just discussing with Lakshmanan sir also, which is like this Vengai incident. They also went to fact finding. I'm sure sir will also throw more light on it. So in this 2023, we are discussing that human excreta is being mixed in a water tank in Pudukkottai district, in Vengai village. And then our police, which has always been told as a Scotland police, of Tamil Nadu police has got that kind of efficiency, is not able to identify claims that not able to identify the perpetrator who did this criminal activity in a habitation where it is close to 200 families, I think. No, sir, 200 or 300 families only. With the dominant community, I think only 200 families. So again, less than 500, they are not able to spot who did it. But definitely we get from the source, they knew who did it. But then there is one particular community in that area, which is Muttarayar community, again falling under the other backward community. So even they don't want to lose that Muttarayar vote. But then what is the dynamics that they are playing when they wanted to really capitalize the Dalit vote? They wanted to have alliance with the so-called VCK if it's in alliance. And you must have seen the statistics also which was rolling like after the post-election that in many of the constituencies, how the SC vote bank really helped the DMK to win elections. And you know, like you would have seen the data, like in most of the places, DMK did not sweep actually. It was predominantly border, some few thousand votes only. So the SC votes were determining for them to, but they think like Prashant Kishore only gave the strategy and then they were able to win and all. So this kind of social, I mean, the dynamics, especially not only in terms of election, all through their political career, they always wanted not to identify either with Ambedkar or not to really be critical on honor killing or not to really criticize and take action when atrocity is happening. So my whole criticism is against DMK, not only now, even before that. I already told you why, I mean, on the whole, the Dravidian politics, we always claim comparatively, we say like Tamil Nadu is a very progressive state. But it's not happening in a real sense. So especially when it comes to the Dalits. So on a very comparative, how much time I have? Okay. On a comparative note, I just wanted to repeat at the national level, BJP is trying to polarize the Hindu votes by stating Hindus versus Muslims or minorities. They want to attack churches and then they openly declare, because they're openly declaring, even in UP, Yogi Adityanath, they are doing open politics. But here we are made to believe that it is a social justice soil, it is a Periyar man and everything. But then we have to go through everything. We are not able to even voice out that this is what is happening, because our so-called progressive people are telling, no, if you are critical about DMK, BJP will come. I feel like BJP is already in. With the kind of behavior that this government is doing, BJP doesn't have to come. In another meeting also I told you, we don't need BJP at all. For us, DMK and ADMK is more than enough. And all the other caste outfits are doing exactly the work that BJP wanted to do. So this is a very, very tricky situation. I feel like, no, that we are not openly able to criticize, and we can do it. Of course, people like us are doing. But then the voice are not heard, and then there is also a kind of very positive image that it is a social justice government. But even the data says the atrocities are increasing. After this government came, there are more number of atrocities which are happening. That is just because how irresponsibly this government is behaving to the atrocities. If at all the government would have taken very stringent action against these atrocities, it would have given a strong message that this government is standing with this marginalized and untouchables and all these Dalits. So, but as I told you already, they wanted to really appease the other backward communities. Just they are working on the vote bank calculation. In a very, very, I don't want to close it in a very negative note, but it's a very hopeless situation. So we need to really work hard. Definitely we need to work hard. I was very packed in today's schedule, but I really wanted to meet you all because I feel especially students are so powerful, and then students of ACJ are more powerful because you have this pen, and then you can write, you can very strongly write against all these things. You can be so critical about it. So with that hope, I just came. So thanks for the opportunity. Thank you so much for inviting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Semler. So we had some interesting discussion on caste in Islam and then caste in Tamil Nadu. And I think one of the common elements in both these discussions is also how do we imagine, say, minorities or the whole idea of who is a marginalized, what is a marginalized category, and how within those categories, marginalized categories, there are complexities and there are hierarchies and so on and so forth. So with this, we will have a short break, tea break, and after that, we will have Dr. Lakshmanna speaking, and then we'll have open question answer sessions. Okay. Yeah, sorry. If you have any questions for Ms. Semler, maybe we can take, yeah, she'll be leaving now, so we can take a few questions.
Hello. Yeah. Hello, this is not really a question.
Okay.
Ma'am, I really liked your talk and really appreciated the non-neutrality of it. Thank you.
Hi, ma'am. Again, my question is that the Dravidian movement, when it started as the Justice Party and then later on when it transformed as the Periyar movement, like, was the anti-casteism a major ideology of them, or was it basically surrounded on how the dominant community in a dominant community in Tamil Nadu was not the numerically and economically powerful community? There is a whole lot of confusion around the discourse. So can you just give a brief insight on what that was?
Definitely the non-Brahmin movement was relevant because the small population of Brahmins were predominantly occupying every other space. That was definitely relevant. But how did it really reshape itself in the course of time? So when we really talk about non-Brahmin movement, definitely as I quoted there also, it should really go with the anti-caste idea. So if definitely the point of even as Ambedkar pointed out, endogamy is the one thing which is really upholding caste for so many years, 3000 plus years. So we were not focusing on such issues like how do we really put an end to this endogamic practice, intercaste marriage or whatever. But rather this, it got little stuck, like it was anti-Brahmin movement, and then it just limited itself only with the OBCs talking about anti-Brahmin, and then whether the OBCs are really inclusive, okay, leave that point of time. Now, so much of, after so many years of progression, even the Dravidar Kazhagam, is it really talking about these issues? I know I will be criticized by anybody. Honestly, me being a Dalit man, I feel like no, it is not benefited at all in the lives of Dalits. So I'm not talking only from a Dalit point of view. If it is anti-caste movement, we would have really worked in terms of eradicating the entire, or dismantling the entire Varna system. It did not, after so many years also, we couldn't see that kind of thing. At that point, it was relevant, but then I feel now it is not very positively impacted.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Ma'am, you criticize the DMK really well. According to you, which party is actually, taking up the issues of Dalits here?
Of course, VCK is taking a stand for Dalits, but there is also a quite challenge. If you talk too much only about Dalits when it comes to electoral politics, they have to have an alliance. That's a major criticism against them. But all the atrocities against Dalits, even at the national level, somehow I feel like one party which is very vehemently challenging Hindutva politics is also Vidudalai Sirthigal. That's my opinion.
You said that the BJP is, is not even necessary in Tamil Nadu. The two Dravidian parties are doing more than enough. Could you talk about that a little more? Because from what I can see, I may be wrong, that the Dravidian parties are anti-Brahminical, not necessarily anti-caste. But if you look at the BJP's ideology, they are very much converting everything into Hinduism, right? So it's like somebody read Annihilation of Caste and said, okay, you know what, there is no uniting factor for Hindus, so let's come up with the term Hindu. Otherwise, there are only castes, right? So how would you look at the BJP in terms of this mix?
Actually, caste itself is you cannot divide Hinduism and then caste. That is number one. And then when these governments, both the Dravidian parties, are not really curtailing, when this caste is creating a very, very negative impact in the society. Not necessarily it has to be honor killing, even the exclusion, even the discrimination or whatever. So how both the governments have really handled it. So after so many years of these government into power, definitely claiming to be a social justice thing, they should have handled it. So in that sense, I feel like caste is a Hindutva agenda. It's a very straight Hindutva agenda. So there it was pretty easy that Muslim versus Hindus is pretty easy. People will understand very easily. But this is very nuanced that people will not even understand. We ourselves will think like, okay, it's a very progressive state. But how these Sangams have like, even one case where the Gokul Raj honor killing case, even the previous government, ADMK government, the murderer Yuvaraj is coming, and then he is coming like as though he is one hero. Every time when there is election, he's been given bail, and then he's coming out, just to appease the Gounder vote. So that's Hindutva agenda. When you really do, wanted to please them, we go with their agenda. In that sense, I said like, no. Of course, definitely, I also anticipate here that idea of Muslims versus Hindus will not work here. So rather, if at all, even if the right-wing politicians wanted to bring any confusion, they will work with the caste Sangam only. With Jadi Sangam only, they will work. That's what I feel. And it already happened. Even in Ponparapi, I think we went for fact-finding. People who were part of 1 year Sangam joined Hindu Munnani. And they were the one who were attacking. So that's one example for me too.